Hello everyone, my name is Rizkita Mulia. I will be the host for today's podcast, and there will be 5 guests that join us today, which are Naifah Nabila, Kansa Latifah, Madeline Sagala, Kevin Ananda, and Yesti Rela. Today, we are going to talk about the US-China cooperative rivalry. Well, many people address it as the US-China war, but the US and China never had a war. Coined by Joseph Samuel Nye, an American political scientist from Harvard, the current relationship between the US and China is a cooperative rivalry. Since long ago, China and the US have had bilateral relations and have mutual interests. But now, with the US feels threatened by the growth of China, and China keeps growing fast, the rivalry between both of them is unavoidable. Alright, let's start with the cooperation between China and the US first. Naiva, I think you might be the best to explain this one.
Okay, thank you for the time, Rizkita. Relation between the United States and China are the most complex bilateral relation for the United States. Over the past 30 years, China and US relations have undergone an impressive transformation from animosity and conflict to nitrogen. Thus, the vast and complex countries have found common ground on trade, investment, and security. But key issues remain unresolved, and the potential for disturbing differences is real as China becomes an economic powerhouse, a military force in Asia, and a potential US hegemonic competitor. Strategic competition is a framework in which the US is considering its relationship with China, where it works with American allies and partners to protect their interests and values. While America will advance its economic interests, will oppose Beijing aggressive and compulsory action, maintain key military advantage, and vital security cooperation will be strongly involved in the United Nations system, and stand by Beijing when the Chinese authorities violate fundamental human rights and freedoms. The United States will conduct result-oriented diplomacy on common challenges with China, such as climate change and the global health crisis. Then, the US also has a history in assisting China. The US ordered congressional support program in China focused on 6 areas: support for Tibet efforts to protect and preserve culture, and promote sustainable biodiversity and market integration in Tibetan communities, building local capacity in Tibetan target communities to evaluate natural resource management challenges and properly maintain options for natural resource-based biodiversity, promoting environmental standard and protection and market-based reforms, promoting the supremacy of law and human rights, the threat of epidemiological disease, and research to drug trafficking, which focus mainly on penicillin and methamphetamine, their analogs, and pre-extracurricular chemical.
Alright, thank you Naiva. I think the US and China cooperation indeed is complex because they have many cooperation in many sectors. But because China becomes a competitor of the US, then the rivalry starts. And I would like to highlight the economic sector, as this one is what China seems to truly aim for and what the US fears the most from China. Kansa, would you like to have some words regarding it?
Yes, of course, Rizkita. To continue what Naifa said before, initially the cooperative relationship between the US and China did not go well. Why? Mostly the US felt itself being reviled by the China state. From an economic point of view, here, based on recent economists, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and major global investment bank, China officially surpassed the United States to become the world's largest economy by gross domestic product (GDP) in the late 2020s. China's GDP is expected to reach 15.2 $6 trillion in 2021 compared to $23.2 trillion for the US. The small difference is predicted to be surpassed in less than 2 years. As for the net worth, China already surpassed the US at this point, but the economy in China had only recorded 9.2% of what is seen now. This is the lowest economy in China in the third quarter of 2021. Several factors contribution to the weakening of economic growth, namely the energy crisis experienced by China, disruption to the supply chain, and the debt crisis in the property sector. The debt crisis triggered by China's property conglomerate Evergrande has also raised concern about its possible impact on other sectors of the economy. But China has surpassed the US more now because of a good cooperation relationship in terms of the economy, namely jointly developing a COVID-19 vaccine to be able to return funds or even economy assets from both parties.
Hmm. From what I hear from you, Kansa, it is more like from the perspective of the US that why their cooperation with China doesn't go well. But how about from the perspective of China?
I think if you look at it from China's point of view, the point is that China doesn't like it when the US interferes in their internal problems as well as their internal economic development problems because it gives the impression that China is unable to make its country advance economically. If the US interference in China interval of rise, what China had planned would end up in a fine. China doesn't want the US interference in its internal affairs because China knows that the US is thinking about how they can bring down China and make their country economically far above China. And then, for example, for the internal affairs of China that the US staged their notes to our Taiwan Dispatch, Hong Kong Dispatch, and Xinjiang Dispatch, spokesperson Zhao Lijian made the remarks at the daily news briefing when answering a relevant query. It is reported that the US House of Representatives has passed of revised version of Xinjiang related as agreed on by the Senate and House on Tuesday. Zhou said that by cooking applies and making troubles on such issue, some US political are seeking and to contain China and hold by China development through political manipulation and economic bringing in the name of human rights, ending their false scam will never succeed and will only further damage the credibility and image the US government and Congress in China.
Wow. Now, I kind of understand what the US fears. China economic growth indeed really how to describe it? Surprisingly, but not really surprisingly considering China's population and what value they hold. Well, they surprisingly are doing really well in the economy sector. And there is indeed a reason why their cooperation with the US cannot go well. And it is real understandable from the China perspective, as it is an internal affair. What right does the US have over that? Not to mention, China also has called out this matter several times, but till now, the US keeps making speculation on news regarding China that is disadvantageous to China. Well, then do they really need each other? Or can they just destroy each other if they felt really disturbed by each other? Oh, what do you think, Madeline? Would you like to have an opinion regarding this?
Yes, thank you for the time. Well, we can see another thing from what Naifa and Kansa explained about the competition between the two parties in the economic field. What is that? This is a very interesting thing, namely that the US and China actually need each other for a long time in the sense of interdependence, which give rise to a symbiotic mutualism between the two sides. As we can experience and imagine, when two people are friends, the cooperative relationship that exists cannot be separated from the step of Deng Xiaoping, who is willing to open up and open the eyes and heart of the Chinese people to live a better and more advanced life like the United States, which is known as a modern and developed country. Ethical to apply American supports and sponsorship made China officially a member of the WTO in the late 2001. Economic cooperation relationship involving the purchase of United States bonds by China during the economic crisis experienced by the United States until the United States took action to ease bond to be purchased by China in large enough quantities. In the files of export and import and basically there was a conversation between the US and China as trading partner. They had a broad discussion of the macroeconomic situation and multilateral cooperation, considering they are the candidate holder of the world two large economy. They remain partner close trade despite geopolitical tension between them. However, they can live uncomfortably if one of them feels threatened. Rival has a higher growth rate and interference in the internal affairs of its neighbor's country. Then in certain situations it can degenerate into conflict, providing a shift in interest that was originally cooperation towards strategic competition.
Wait, wait, Madeline, I have a question regarding what you just said before. Then, what if they insist on not cooperating anymore? What will happen?
I think this is a good and interesting question, Naifa. Well, I think a lot of people want to know about this, including Asia Pacific citizens. Considering that the US is also trying to apply strategic politics to the Asia Pacific region and China has the potential to be a barrier. Why Asia Pacific? As former President Obama said, the Asia Pacific region is seen as the center of international activity in the 21st century. Then, well, since the tension between the US and China, the people of Asia Pacific feel restless and worry about this tension because if this continue, they will also be affected not only in the economic files but also in the security, political files, even social. What if they choose not to work together anymore? In the sense of choosing the option of war and destroying each other. This is in addition to harming country in the Asia Pacific. This step is also detrimental to the US and China itself. Just imagine, they are country with great influence in the world choosing to go to war. Like what I say before, bilateral relationships are like friendship relationship. If so, when America feels the economic crisis, no country can significantly help it. Well, China is the number two stronger country, right? Then, if China is struggling to develop in terms of its resources, then nothing can be as significant as the US to help China. Do they go to war? Their country will be destroyed and their people will suffer. Maybe one of them will win. So what? The people are also suffering because there is little budget left for war, and I don't think the United States has allowed this to happen either. If you don't want to make peace and cooperate, but also don't want to fight, then it's like someone who doesn't know each other. I think like that. Thank you.
Alright, thank you, Madeline, for your perspective. This makes it more clear that the rivalry between the US and China is really complex because if they choose war in the end and destroy each other, it will greatly affect both of them. But also the military confrontation has the potential to happen. Well, the real war is not going to happen because they know it will destroy the earth. Oh, this reminds me that some people presume that the US and China are in a Cold War, but they are not in a Cold War because there is no trade war, arms race, ideology fight, proxy war, or technological race that are intentionally made by both of the countries. Joseph Samuel Nye from Harvard also suggests that it is not a Cold War, and saying it a Cold War is potentially dangerous as it will lead to an ineffective solution.
Oh, why Triskita? Then why do many people think that China and the US are in a Cold War? I mean, there should have been a reason, right?
Well, that is a good question, Kansa. I think the reason why some people might think that they are in a Cold War, although President Joe Biden already said that the US is not seeking a new Cold War, is because it seems that the US consider and act like they are third war, embrace ideological fight, and technology race between them and China. But in China's eyes, they don't consider it a war or race. It is more like China just do it for their own good. Then, in ideological fight, it is only the US who sticks their nose to China's internal problems. But China never did the same thing to the US. But well, sadly, the US seems offended by all of it. General Yao Yunzu, a major general, senior advisor at China Association of Military Science, academic committee member at Center for International Security and Strategy at Tsinghua University, has also stated that China does not seek hegemony. Hegemony is leadership or dominance by one country. So China doesn't intend to be politically or economically or militarily more powerful than anybody else, including the US. The US has been the superpowers for decades alone, but with China becoming the superpowers too, in a short time on top of it, the US is not happy with it. This has also been addressed by Professor Kishore Mahbubani, Distinguished Fellow of the Asia Research Institute at the National University of Singapore, and Professor Chan Hang Che, Ambassador at Large at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Singapore. The situation right now is that both of them are superpowers, but the US seems to fear that China might take their position. Then I think because they are the superpowers, they try to get public sympathy or support from other countries so that things can go their way. But I remember Professor Kishore also stated that we should never ever believe that any great power is doing anything except to defend its own interests. So we should not easily believe what they say, but also in other words, for the sake of their interests, to what extent will they act? And will that impact us or other smaller countries? Kevin, I think you might want to say something about this matter.
Yes, thank you. As a big countries that have influence in the world, China and the United States are always competing for reckoning as superpowers. They can do anything to achieve the national interests of each of these countries. One of them is the trade war. As I think, even if one or both of them doesn't want to admit it, many agree that they are in a trade war, whereas we know that the competition between these two countries from the past until now is still going on. And the competition between the two countries is often brought up by various groups, especially the international community. The resumption of international between the United States and China in 2018 was beginning of the formation of an economic conflict between the United States and China, which we know as the trade war. The recurring trade war between the United States and China was preceded by an increase or decrease determined import duties for all countries, especially China. Apart from that, the occurrence of this conflict was also caused by the behavior of the United States, which boycott Chinese product, so that in the end, two countries got involved in repulsing each other on imported product, both from China and the United States. Of the many burdensome rules and policies, in the end, it prompted China to respond the rules and policies implemented by United States. The existences of this economic conflict, of course, will not only bring losses to the two competing countries. The decline in the global economy caused by the trade war actually had a significant impact on several countries in the world, including Indonesia, which a partner of the two countries.
Oh, that's disheartening to hear. Then specifically, what impact doesn't it has on us?
Well, it depends, Madeline. To Indonesia, the Indonesian economy has experienced stagnation and instability since the official implementation of the trade war caused by the very high increase in the value of exports. The United States protection policy has made Indonesia face in a dilemma in determining its next policy. There are two factors that affect Indonesia in the trade competition between the United States and China. The first, internal factors that can be felt directly by Indonesia, such as decline or weakening of the export value between Indonesia and China and between Indonesia and the United States. And the external factor that influence Indonesia's policy from the trade war between the United States and China are China's interest in long-term investment in an Indonesia political influence, so that Indonesia can be included in the list of countries included in the Belt Road Initiative project spearheaded by China. As we know, the two countries in conflict are important trading partners for Indonesia. This makes Indonesia one of the countries most affected by the trade war, and with the re-escalation of the trade war, the Indonesian government eases policies or solution in order to be profitable and eliminate the dilemma of choosing which country to become Indonesia's main partner.
Thank you, Kevin, for your perspective. It seems that the impact it has on smaller countries is quite big, especially on Indonesia. But I heard Indonesia economy is now pretty good compared to other countries in Southeast Asia. Then I think there are things that we, as a smaller country, should do regarding the US-China cooperative rivalry. I think Yesti might be able to explain this more. Yesti, please.
Okay, thank you, Rizkita. Impact to smaller countries. I will take the ASEAN for discuss. The US-China trade war will also harm ASEAN as an institution because it has the potential to hamper the realization of the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint 2025. If the trade war between the two countries continues, the production of export goods between the two will stagnate and of course will have an impact on supply shortages and the high demand for products in ASEAN member countries. For the impact of US and China protectionism, Thailand, Singapore, and Malaysia are the most affected. As for the depreciation of money, it looks real to have an impact on Indonesia and the Philippines. The trade war between the US and China is an inevitable phenomenon. As a regional organization that has relation with the two countries, ASEAN will certainly be affected by the rivalry that occurs as a result of the trade war. The economic stability of ASEAN member countries will falter and will affect many sectors. So a way is needed to resolve the problems between the US and China. The idea of resolving the trade war will be difficult for ASEAN to resolve if it wants to become a mediator because ASEAN must be neutral. So it will be wiser if this matter were resolved by ASEAN member countries without representing ASEAN and several other countries. Therefore, RCEP appears as a forum in an effort to overcome the impact of the trade war. Through RCEP, it can be seen that member countries have the will to cooperate regardless of the quantity that will be obtained in accordance with the concept of absolute gains in the perspective of neoliberalism.
Thank you, Yesti, for your insight. I actually kind of worried about the situation of this US-China cooperative rivalry. That, as I can see, is leaning towards the rivalry more. And to add, I think that we should not get into their rivalry. I suggest we just being neutral or non-block. I remember Professor Chan Hangche said that we should make it clear that we don't want to choose. We want to cooperate with the US as well as we want to cooperate with China. We want to cooperate with both of them. Then in the case of the Southeast Asian countries, which mostly are still developing countries, we should cooperate and help each other too, so that we don't become too dependent on big countries like the US and China. Well, I think this closes the topic regarding the US-China cooperative rivalry. I hope that our discussion and opinions can be useful for you, and thank you for listening to us. See you on another chance.